Isabel Torres had both of my wrists pinned to the mat when she looked down at me and smiled. "Still want a rematch?" Around us, somebody laughed, somebody else slapped the edge of the ring, and I could hear Nora telling the next pair to keep moving. None of that was the problem. The problem was that Isabel had already won the exchange. The round was over, and she still hadn't let go. I looked from her hands around my wrists to her face. "Depends," I said. "Are you planning to win all of them from up there?" Her smile sharpened. "You're in a terrible negotiating position. I've had worse. You're a firefighter." "Exactly." She leaned back just enough to ease the pressure without releasing me. "Then you should know when a situation is beyond saving." I should have tapped the mat and let the joke end. Instead, I met her eyes and said, "Good thing I'm stubborn. My name is Jack Sullivan. I was 31, worked as a firefighter in Phoenix, and had spent most of my adult life believing I handled pressure pretty well. Burning kitchens, highway wrecks, alarms at 3 in the morning. None of those situations gave you much room for hesitation. Kickboxing was different. I had joined Nora Kim's gym 6 months earlier because my workouts at the station had become predictable, and I wanted to be bad at something again. Isabel made sure I got my wish. She was 32, the head kickboxing coach, a former amateur fighter, and annoyingly good at identifying the exact moment confidence became carelessness. She had beaten me in sparring twice that month. I had asked for a third round anyway. That was how we worked. I challenged her. She corrected me. I made some comment I thought was clever. She usually found a way to make me regret it. "Time," Nora called again, louder this time. Isabel's gaze stayed on mine for another second before she released my wrists and stood. She held out a glove. I took it, and she pulled me up with enough force to remind me that she absolutely did not need the assistance. "You hesitated," she said. "I was thinking. That's what hesitation looks like with better branding. I was deciding whether embarrassing you in front of your own class would be disrespectful." Isabel gave me the calm expression she saved for students who were about to learn something unpleasant. "Jack, you have never been close enough to that problem for me to worry about it." A couple of people nearby laughed. I bowed dramatically. She tried not to smile and failed for half a second. Normally, that would have been the end of it. I would grab water, she would start the next drill, and whatever happened between us would stay safely disguised as competition. This time, as she turned away, she glanced back at me. "And you never answered me. About the rematch?" She nodded. "Anytime." Isabel's expression changed. Not much, but enough. "Careful what you ask for." Class ended 40 minutes later. I helped stack pads because everyone helped at Nora's gym, not because Isabel was on the other side of the room, winding hand wraps into neat little rolls. At least that was what I told myself. She had been different after our round. Not distant, exactly. More precise. She corrected my footwork without touching my shoulder the way she normally did. And when I made a joke during bag work, she gave me a look that suggested she was deciding whether to answer it as my coach or as something else. I had noticed that line between us for weeks. I just had no intention of becoming the guy who assumed a woman's professional attention meant romantic interest. Isabel had authority in that room, and I respected it. The problem was that respect had become a very convenient place to hide. Nora clapped twice before anyone could escape toward the locker rooms. 30 seconds. "I need victims." She stood beside the ring, holding a clipboard, which at that gym was usually a bad sign. Nora was in her late 30s, owned the place, and enjoyed volunteering other people with the confidence of someone who knew they could not legally fight her over administrative decisions. She announced that the gym was hosting a charity exhibition 6 weeks later to fund a beginner self-defense program. There would be open classes, demonstrations, local sponsors, and a ticketed exhibition night. Then she looked directly at Isabel and me. I already disliked where this was going. Our main demo is going to be technique versus strength, Nora said. Isabel and Jack. Someone behind me made an appreciative noise. Isabel folded her arms. Why Jack? He's athletic, large enough for the visual contrast, takes instruction, and people enjoy watching you hit him. That last one feels unnecessarily honest, I said. Nora ignored me. Isabel looked at her, then at me. I expected her to object on professional grounds, which would have been reasonable. Instead, she asked, how many rehearsals? Twice a week, more during the last 10 days. Nora checked her clipboard. Promotional footage, beginner clinic rehearsal, then the exhibition sequence. I heard myself say, I'm in. Isabel turned her head slowly. Nobody asked you yet. I'm demonstrating initiative. You're demonstrating exactly why I usually make you wait for instructions. So that's a yes? Nora covered a laugh with a cough. Isabel stared at me, and for a moment the gym seemed much quieter than it actually was. If we do this, she said, Nora handles your regular evaluation for the next 6 weeks. I'm not grading you, recommending you for anything, or deciding your progress while we're exhibition partners. That caught me off guard. She was not avoiding the situation. She was changing the rules around it. Nora nodded immediately. Fine with me. Isabel kept looking at me. And when we rehearse, you don't get to turn every correction into flirting. I picked up my water bottle. That sounds difficult to enforce. I'm serious. The humor in her face had disappeared. I realized she was giving me something I had spent weeks pretending I did not need. Clarity. So I stopped smiling. Then I'll take it seriously. Isabel studied me for a beat, apparently surprised that I had not produced another joke. Good. I started toward the locker room before she called my name. When I turned, she was holding the focus mitts against her hip. Tomorrow, 7:30, just us and Nora. First rehearsal, first rematch. The corner of her mouth lifted. Try not to hesitate this time. The next evening, I arrived 10 minutes early and found Isabel alone beside the ring. 2 pairs of gloves rested on the bench between us. She tossed one pair toward me. I caught them. Nora's late? I asked. 5 minutes. Isabel stepped through the ropes and started tightening her wraps. Enough time to settle something. I climbed in, after her. This already sounds unfair. Yesterday, every time you had an opening, you hesitated. You mentioned that. I'm mentioning it again. She faced me across the ring. No class around us now, no audience laughing at our usual routine. When you ask me for a rematch, Jack, are you actually trying to beat me? Her eyes held mine. Or are you just looking for an excuse to keep my attention? For once, I didn't have a joke ready. Isabel stood across from me, with her gloves half fastened, waiting like she expected me to either answer honestly or prove her point. Both, I said. Her eyebrows lifted. That wasn't one of the options. You asked whether I'm trying to beat you or keep your attention. I'm trying to beat you because I like having your attention. She looked at me for a long second, then finished, tightening the strap around her wrist. Better. Better than what? Pretending you're only here because you enjoy getting kicked. I do have hobbies. Hands up, firefighter. She came at me before Nora arrived, and the next 5 minutes were less a rehearsal than an argument conducted through footwork. Isabel pushed the pace. I gave it back. When I slipped a jab and landed a clean touch to her shoulder, she smiled like I had finally answered correctly. When she swept my balance and made me stumble into the ropes, I heard her say, "Round's not over." That became our phrase almost immediately. Nora arrived carrying coffee and no apology. She watched 2 rounds, then explained what she wanted from the exhibition. The demonstration had to be fast enough to entertain people who knew nothing about fighting, but honest enough that regular members would not roll their eyes. Isabel would show how timing and position could neutralize size. I would represent the larger, stronger attacker without turning into some cartoon villain. So basically, I said, my job is to look dangerous and lose gracefully. Isabel adjusted one of the pads. You already have half of that covered. Which half? Round's not over. Nora laughed and started filming reference clips. We worked through entries, counters, clinch positions, and a final sequence where I was supposed to pressure Isabel toward the ropes before she reversed me. The first few attempts went smoothly. On the fourth, I felt her step slightly late and reduced my force without thinking. She still completed the counter, but she stopped immediately. "What was that?" she asked. I knew exactly what she meant. "You were off balance. So I didn't want to drive through you." "Why?" I glanced at Nora, who was wisely pretending to study the camera screen. "Because you were off balance." Isabel took off one glove with her teeth and pointed it at me. "Jack, if you change the pressure, because you think I need protecting, I can't practice the actual counter." "I wasn't trying to protect you." She gave me a look. "You pulled the strike. I adjusted. You protected me." There was enough irritation in her voice that my instinct was to make it funny. I nearly did. Then I remembered the question from 5 minutes earlier. "Yeah," I said. "I did." That stopped her more effectively than an argument would have. I rolled my shoulders and stepped back into position. "You were late, and I didn't trust the angle." "That's on me. Tell me how hard you want it." Isabel's expression softened, but only slightly. "As hard as you would go with someone you trusted to handle it." That seems like a dangerous sentence. "Jack, right, serious." We reset. This time I committed. Isabel absorbed the pressure, pivoted, caught my arm, and turned me hard enough that I had to move quickly to stay upright. The sequence looked completely different when I stopped helping her. It was sharper, faster, and considerably less flattering to me. Nora lowered the camera. "That's the one." Isabel was breathing harder now, but she looked pleased. Again. We did it again, then again. On the last attempt, I anticipated her turn and forced her to change the counter midway. She still won the exchange, but she had to work for it. When we separated, she tapped one glove against mine. "That was better." "You mean I'm improving?" "Don't make this emotional." "Too late. I'm calling my mother." Isabel shook her head, but she was smiling. The important part was that she did not ask me to soften anything after that. Over the next 2 weeks, rehearsals stopped feeling like something Nora had assigned and started feeling like a part of my week. I arranged everything else around. Isabel and I trained Tuesday and Friday evenings, plus one early session before my shift whenever our schedules lined up. The phrase, "round's not over," followed us outside the ring. If I dodged a question about why firefighters lived on terrible coffee, she used it. If she started reorganizing a clinic plan for the third time because she refused to delegate, I used it back. She hated that, which naturally encouraged me. I learned that the beginner clinic mattered more to her than the exhibition itself. She wanted people who had spent years telling themselves they were not athletic enough, strong enough, or confident enough to walk into a combat gym and feel like they belonged there. "Especially women," she said one morning, while we stacked pads after training. "Too many places advertise a women's class like it's a softer version of the real thing." She set one pad on top of another with more force than necessary. "I don't want softer. I want accessible without being insulting." I could have offered solutions. My station had access to community events, safety programs, public outreach, plenty of people who would show up if I asked. Instead, I said, "What do you need from us?" Isabel stopped stacking pads. "Use my crew. If you want bodies for demos, registration help, people to pay for tickets, whatever. You tell me what helps." She considered that. "I don't want 6 firefighters turning it into a recruitment table. Trust me, nobody wants that. Half of them can barely recruit someone to replace the coffee filter." Her mouth twitched. "Paid tickets would help. Maybe 2 volunteers for registration." "Done." "Anything else?" "Not yet." I nodded and left it there. The next day, 12 firefighters bought tickets. I did not tell her until she asked why Nora was grinning at me. The strangest shift happened after an early Friday session. We finished at 6:40, and I had enough time to shower and get to the station. Isabel had an hour before her first client. Neither of us needed to stay. We ended up outside anyway, sitting on the low concrete wall beside the parking lot, with paper cups from the place across the street. She drank something, with enough cinnamon in it to qualify as breakfast. I had black coffee because apparently I enjoyed being judged. You know, she said, looking at my cup, there are easier ways to make people worry about you. You coach adults who voluntarily get punched. That's different. How? They usually have better taste. We sat there for another minute before I looked at her. Do you spend this much time with all your exhibition partners? She turned her cup slowly between both hands. No. Good. That's all you've got? I was trying not to make it weird. You're sitting outside a kickboxing gym at 7 in the morning, asking your coach whether she hangs out with other men. Former evaluating coach. Temporarily. Important distinction. Isabel smiled into her coffee. Then she looked at me and said, only the ones who keep asking for rematches. I was still thinking about that line later that afternoon, when Nora sent the three of us a draft from one of the event sponsors. The proposed graphic showed a firefighter silhouette on one side, Isabel on the other, and a headline in enormous red letters. Firefighter vs. Feminine coach. Underneath it, in smaller type, someone had added, winner gets dinner. I laughed once because it looked so absurd that I assumed it had to be a joke. Then I saw Isabel's reply. 4 words, absolutely not. No smiley face, no sarcasm, no rounds not over. For the first time since we started rehearsing, I realized there was something about our chemistry she was willing to play with, privately. And something completely different she refused to let anyone else own. I called Nora before I answered the group message. Tell me that graphic is somebody's first draft. There was a pause long enough to tell me I had guessed correctly. The sponsor thinks it's fun, she said. They're putting up a lot of money, Jack. I looked at the image again. Isabel had been turned into the female coach. I had been turned into the firefighter, and apparently, dinner with one of us was now a prize you could win by surviving 3 rounds. It looks like a bachelor auction designed by somebody who just discovered kickboxing. Nora laughed despite herself. I didn't approve it. I sent it because I wanted both of you to see it before I pushed back. That should have settled things. Instead, because I was still thinking, like someone trying to save a fundraiser rather than someone thinking about what the headline actually meant, I said, maybe there's a version that keeps the joke without making it this bad. Nora went quiet. You may want to say that more carefully when Isabel calls. She called 30 seconds later. You think there's a version of this that works? No greeting, no build-up. I could hear traffic behind her, and the sharpness in her voice told me she had already spoken to Nora. I think the sponsor clearly wants something playful, I said. If we change the wording, maybe we don't have to throw out the entire idea. What part are you trying to save? The competition angle. People like a challenge. The competition angle is fine. Her voice stayed controlled, which somehow made me more aware that I was missing something. Winner gets dinner is not a competition angle. I rubbed a hand over my face. I know. That part is stupid. It makes me the prize. Nobody who knows you is going to read it that way. The second the words left my mouth, I knew I had stepped into it. Isabel went silent. That's your argument? She asked. No, that came out wrong. People who know me already respect me, so it's fine if the advertisement introduces me to everyone else, as the woman a firefighter gets to take to dinner if he wins. Isabel, I'm saying the sponsor probably didn't mean it like that. I don't care what they meant. There it was. A sentence with no room around it. I tried to recover, but my oldest habit in uncomfortable moments kicked in before my judgment did. For what it's worth, I'm pretty sure you'd be the one winning dinner. Nothing. Not even an irritated breath. That was a joke, I said. I know. Her disappointment was worse than anger. I spent half my amateur career getting introduced as the girl fighting tonight. Not by my record, not by my gym, not by what I'd done. Just the girl. Then I started coaching. And suddenly, every interview question was about whether men had trouble taking instructions from me. I am not spending 6 weeks building a serious beginner program, so somebody can advertise me like the romantic reward at the end of your firefighter challenge. I leaned against the kitchen counter in my apartment and stared at the sponsor graphic on my phone. For the first time, I saw it without the ridiculous headline being funny. You're right, Jack. I don't want you agreeing because I'm angry. I'm not. She was quiet again. I should have understood it before you had to explain it, I said. I didn't. She exhaled slowly. We train tomorrow at 7. Are we okay? We train tomorrow at 7, she repeated. Then the call ended. The next evening, Isabel was already wrapping her hands when I arrived. She nodded once when I walked in and went directly into the exhibition sequence. No comment about my shirt. No remark about the coffee I had brought. No rounds not over when I missed a step. She corrected my stance, adjusted the timing, and moved on. It was technically perfect and personally miserable. Halfway through the second round, I tried a light comment about Nora, making us rehearse until our fundraiser qualified as an Olympic sport. Isabel just said, "Again." I stopped smiling. If she wanted professional, I could give her professional. What I could not do was pretend I had not helped create the reason for it. We worked another 20 minutes before she called the session. I took off my gloves and said, "I'm not going to talk you into being less angry." Isabel looked over. "Good. But I am going to fix my part." Her expression tightened. "What does that mean?" "It means I agreed to be in the promotion. If the promotion treats you like a prize, I don't participate in it. Jack, the sponsor is helping fund the clinic. Then they can fund a better idea." I spoke to Nora in her office before I left. I did not tell her what Isabel should accept, and I did not threaten the whole event. I simply told her that if my participation required a romantic gimmick where Isabel became something I could win, she needed another firefighter. Nora leaned back in her chair and studied me. "You know they'll probably change it if both of you object." "Good. And you know Isabel never asked you to do this." "Also good." Nora's mouth twitched. "You two are exhausting. That feels like feedback outside the scope of this meeting." She laughed, then turned her monitor toward me. "I already sent them a counterproposal. Real firefighters versus real technique. No fake date, no dinner prize, no gendered nonsense. I read it twice. It was better. More importantly, it still sold the thing we were actually doing." "Use that?" Nora nodded. "That's the plan." I did not tell Isabel. Not because I was trying to be noble, but because calling her and saying I had defended her would have turned the decision into another performance. 2 days later, she found out anyway. Nora apparently had fewer objections to taking credit on my behalf. After Friday practice, Isabel waited until the last beginner left before walking over to where I was unlacing my shoes. "Why didn't you tell me?" I looked up. "About what?" "Nora told me you made your participation conditional. I fixed my part. That's it, pretty much." She folded her arms. "You didn't want credit?" "I wanted the advertisement changed. Those are not the same thing." I stood. "Exactly." Something in her face shifted. The tension did not disappear, but it changed shape. "I was angry with you," she said. "I noticed. You deserved some of it." "Also noticed." Her mouth almost curved. "Don't ruin this." I raised both hands. "Wouldn't dream of it." Isabel stepped closer, not enough to make it dramatic, just enough that I could no longer pretend the conversation belonged entirely to the gym. "There's something else you should know," she said. "Okay. I am attracted to you." No joke, no softened wording, no escape hatch. She watched my face while I processed it. "That was direct," I said. "You complained about mixed signals." "I don't remember complaining. Your entire personality complained." I smiled despite myself. Then I let the smile go. I'm attracted to you too. Isabel nodded once, like she had expected the answer, but still needed to hear it. That doesn't mean I want this turned into part of the fundraiser. Neither do I. And I don't want people watching us, because they think there's some story happening between the firefighter and the female coach. There is a story happening. Her eyes narrowed. Jack. Privately, I added, very privately. For the first time all week, she laughed. It was small, but it felt like getting something important back. She picked up her bag and headed toward the door, then stopped beside me. After the exhibition, she said. What about it? If you still want to take me somewhere, when nobody is selling tickets, and nobody is watching, ask me then. My first instinct was to answer with the easiest joke available. Something about needing 6 weeks to choose a restaurant. Instead, I looked at her and said, I will. Isabel held my gaze for a second, then nodded. Good. She opened the door and stepped outside. And Jack? Yeah? Round's not over. The door closed behind her before I could answer, and standing there in an empty gym, I finally understood the challenge she had actually given me. She had already told me what she wanted. The next move was mine. By the time the revised posters went up, the event had stopped feeling like a small gym fundraiser and started looking like something half of Phoenix had decided to attend. My firehouse alone bought 24 tickets, mostly because one of the guys found the promotional photo of Isabel standing across from me with her gloves up and taped it inside the kitchen cabinet. Under it, somebody had written Sullivan, last noun poto. That led to 3 straight shifts of advice I had not requested. You know she's going to drop you in front of everybody, right? Mason asked, while checking equipment one morning. That is generally how sparring works. No, I mean emotionally. Please inspect something, he grinned. I'm just saying, if you're going to lose to a woman 40 pounds lighter than you, at least make it look close. I shut the compartment door harder than necessary. The joke itself did not bother me. What bothered me was finally noticing how automatic the assumption was. If Isabel won, people treated it like a funny reversal. If I won, they treated it like the expected result. She had been fighting that framing for years, while I had walked into it for 6 weeks and already found it irritating. At our next rehearsal, I told her about the poster in the station kitchen. Isabel tightened one glove and said, Did they at least use a good photo? You look terrifying. So yes. Apparently my dignity is now a community project, she smiled. Your dignity left around week 2. I'm pretty sure you swept it. Bad footwork. We started warming up, and the old rhythm between us came back easily, now that neither of us was pretending it meant nothing. That made the whole thing more dangerous in a way I liked. Isabel knew I was attracted to her. I knew she felt the same. The boundary was still there, but it was no longer a wall. It was a decision we were both making until the exhibition ended. 2 days later, Nora asked us to meet with the sponsor representative before rehearsal. His name was Greg Dalton, and he had the kind of polished enthusiasm that made every sentence sound like it belonged on a slide deck. He loved the revised promotion. Ticket sales were strong. The firefighter angle was testing well. The beginner clinic had already filled its first session. Then he opened his laptop and said, There's just one small production note for the final exchange. Isabel and I looked at each other. I already disliked the phrase production note. Greg played a mock-up of the planned ending. In it, I landed a clean final combination. Isabel stumbled back, and the crowd got what he called a hero finish. Nothing disrespectful, he said quickly. She looks strong the whole time. Jack just gets the final visual. I stared at the screen. Why? Greg seemed surprised by the question. Because you're the firefighter. That's the image people connect with. Big finish, big applause. Everyone wins. Isabel did not argue. That was the part that made me pay attention. She simply asked, Is the result supposed to be fixed? Greg gave a diplomatic smile. It's an exhibition. We're controlling the story. Nora shifted in her chair. I could tell she hated the suggestion. But I also knew the sponsor was covering a large portion of the clinic equipment and insurance. Greg kept talking about optics, photographs, and giving the audience a satisfying ending. Isabel listened until he finished. Then she looked at me. Your call. I frowned. Why mine? Because he's asking you to take the finish. You're fine with that? No. Her answer was immediate. But I'm not going to make the choice for you. Greg tried to step back in, but Isabel raised a hand without looking at him. If the promotion matters more to Jack than the rematch, he should accept it. There was no accusation in her voice. That made the choice cleaner. I looked at Greg. No fixed finish. He blinked. Jack, nobody's asking you to fake the whole thing. You're asking me to fake the part people remember. It's entertainment. Then let it be entertaining. I pointed toward Isabel. She fights me honestly. I fight her honestly. If I win an exchange, great. If she puts me on the floor in front of half my station, they'll survive. Greg glanced toward Nora. That's not exactly what we discussed. Nora leaned back. It is now. Isabel stayed quiet. I could feel her watching me, but I did not turn the decision into a performance for her. Greg finally closed that laptop and said he would adjust the production plan. When he left, Nora exhaled and muttered something about sponsors being more dangerous than fighters. Isabel waited until the office door closed. You didn't have to do that. I know. That answer is becoming annoying. You like annoying. In controlled doses. Our final hard rehearsal was the next night. Isabel was different from the first bell, faster, less patient. She did not give me clean looks at the movements we had repeated for weeks, which meant she was testing whether I actually meant what I had said in Nora's office. I understood the challenge by the second exchange. You're changing the sequence, I said. You wanted honest. She stepped forward. Round's not over. We went again. I caught one kick on my forearm, countered, and she slipped outside before I could follow. She pressed me toward the ropes, exactly like she had done dozens of times, then reached for the same angle she liked when I overcommitted. This time I saw it coming. Instead of driving forward, I shifted my weight, turned with her, and caught her balance before she could finish the reversal. For one clean second, everything changed. Isabel ended up against the ropes, with my forearm, controlling the space between us and my other glove, positioned where the next strike would have landed if we had been fighting for real. I stopped immediately. Her eyes widened, then narrowed with something that looked suspiciously like pride. You finally saw it. I have excellent teachers. Don't get sentimental. You're trapped. I'm allowed one sentence. She pushed off the ropes and reset. I expected her to laugh or call the round. Instead, she raised her gloves. Again. My pulse jumped. Not because I had finally caught her, because she looked genuinely excited that I had. No embarrassment, no bruised authority. No need to restore the hierarchy. She wanted me difficult. She wanted the version of me that made her work. The next round was harder. Isabel attacked my lead leg until I started anticipating low kicks, then changed levels and caught me with a combination I never saw coming. I ended up sitting against the bottom rope laughing while she stood over me. That was revenge. That was education. The distinction feels theoretical. She offered her glove. I took it and stood. We were both breathing hard. Neither of us moved away. Tomorrow night, I said. What about it? After the event, I want to. The front door opened behind us before I could finish. 3 members came in talking loudly, followed by Nora carrying 2 boxes of shirts. Isabel stepped back, and the moment disappeared into normal gym noise. I almost let it go. That was the familiar move. Wait for a cleaner opportunity. Tell myself I was being respectful, and let Isabel create the opening again. She picked up her water bottle and started walking toward the office. Before she reached it, she looked back at me. She had heard enough to know exactly what I had been trying to say. Jack. Yeah? She gave me the smallest smile. Round's not over. Then she disappeared through the office door. The exhibition began the next evening with every seat filled. My crew had claimed an entire section near the ring, which meant I could hear them before I even walked out from the locker room. Across the gym, Isabel was helping one of the beginner clinic participants tighten her gloves. She looked calm, focused, completely in her element. When she finally glanced toward me, she lifted one eyebrow. I raised my gloves in answer. In less than an hour, one of us would win the final exchange and one of us would lose it. For the first time since I met her, I knew neither result mattered nearly as much as what I planned to do. Once there was no bell left to hide behind. By the time Nora called us into the ring, the gym had gone from familiar to almost unrecognizable. Folding chairs filled the edges of the training floor. The beginner clinic tables were crowded, and my entire firehouse had somehow become the loudest section in the building, without violating any official noise ordinance. Isabel stood across from me, while Nora explained the exhibition rules to the crowd. Black gloves, black shorts, hair tied back, expression calm. She looked exactly like the coach I had spent 6 months trying to impress, and nothing like a woman waiting for me to make a romantic decision. That helped. Whatever happened after the bell would be ours. Whatever happened before it belonged to the demonstration. Nora stepped out of the ring. The bell sounded, and Isabel immediately kicked me in the leg, hard enough to erase every thoughtful thing I had planned to say later. There was no staged opening. I moved forward, she angled away, and we fell into the rhythm we had spent 6 weeks building. The crowd reacted every time I pressured her toward the ropes, and even louder whenever she turned me around. I could hear my crew shouting advice that ranged from technically questionable to personally insulting. Isabel caught me with a fast combination, and I answered with one of my own. For a few seconds, neither of us smiled. That was how I knew she trusted me. She was not slowing down to make the demonstration cleaner, and I was not giving her comfortable openings because I wanted the audience to like her. We were actually testing each other. Halfway through the final round, she stepped inside exactly the way she had during rehearsal. I recognized the angle, shifted first, and landed the cleanest combination I had ever put together against her. Her head snapped back, just enough to tell me I had surprised her. The room exploded. Mason stood on his chair, yelled us something about the fire department finally restoring order to Phoenix. Isabel reset, touched her gloves together once, and gave me a look that said I had just made a serious tactical mistake. She came back harder. I blocked the first kick, missed the second, and followed her movement when she changed direction. For 3 exchanges, I managed to stay with her. Then, I committed too far to a right hand. Isabel disappeared off the line, hooked my balance, and turned my momentum against me before I could recover. 1 second I was trying to pressure her backward. The next I was staring at the ceiling, with Isabel standing over me and the bell ringing above the noise. She had won the final exchange cleanly. My crew booed with theatrical outrage. I started laughing before I was fully upright. Isabel offered me a glove. "Still want a rematch?" she asked quietly. "Absolutely." She pulled me up, and I could see the satisfaction in her face. Not because she had beaten me. Because I had finally made her work for it. The announcer climbed into the ring while we were still catching our breath. He thanked the sponsors, mentioned how much money had been raised, then turned toward me with the kind of grin that warned me somebody was about to resurrect an idea we had already buried. "Jack, after 6 weeks of training together, I think everyone here has one question. Do you want another rematch with your coach?" The audience laughed, and somebody from my station yelled, "Ask her to dinner." Isabel's expression changed almost imperceptibly. She had told me what she wanted. Ask when nobody was selling tickets and nobody was watching. The easy move would have been to use the crowd. Everybody would cheer. She would probably say yes, and I could call it confidence. Instead, I took the microphone, looked at Isabel, then handed it straight back. That particular question isn't for an audience. The announcer blinked. My crew groaned dramatically. Isabel looked down for a second, and when she looked back at me, she was smiling. The fundraiser kept going for another 2 hours. I helped at registration because that was the job Nora had originally given me, carried a few boxes, because they genuinely needed carrying and resisted the strange urge to invent 17 additional reasons to remain useful. Isabel moved through the room, answering questions from beginners, thanking sponsors, introducing Nora to parents, and taking pictures with people who had attended the clinic. I watched her without hovering. That turned out to be surprisingly difficult. Near the end, one of the women from the beginner session told Isabel she had almost left before class because she was afraid everyone would laugh at her. Isabel listened, asked what changed her mind, then stayed with her until she had signed up for another session. Watching that interaction reminded me why I had noticed Isabel long before I admitted I wanted her. She took people seriously. Not dramatically, not sentimentally. She simply behaved as if their effort deserved respect. Eventually the chairs were folded, the last sponsor left, and Nora locked the front entrance on her way out. "Alarm sets automatically," she said. Then she looked at both of us. "I have no professional opinion about anything that happens after I walk through that door." Isabel stared at her. Nora held up both hands. I said no opinion. The door closed. Silence settled over the gym for the first time all night. Isabel stood near the registration table, checking the final clinic list. I could have helped. There were papers to stack, cups to throw away, and probably 20 things I could have used as an excuse to stand beside her, without saying what I had come to say. Instead, I stayed where I was until she finished. She put down the clipboard and looked across the room at me. "You're being suspiciously quiet. I'm trying something new. Dangerous." I walked toward her. "You asked me something in the ring." Isabel leaned against the table. "I ask you a lot of things. You asked if I still wanted a rematch, and you said yes. I changed my mind." That got her attention. She straightened slightly. "Already?" "Yeah." I stopped a few feet away from her. "I don't want another rematch tomorrow." Her eyes narrowed, waiting. "I want dinner with you tomorrow night. Somewhere that doesn't have gloves, mats, sponsors, students, firefighters, or Nora pretending she doesn't have opinions. An actual date." Isabel said nothing for long enough that I started wondering whether confidence had finally become stupidity. Then she folded her arms. "Would you still be asking if I dropped you in the first 30 seconds tonight?" "You've dropped me faster than that." "That wasn't my question." I nodded. "Yes, I would still ask." She studied my face. "Why?" "Because losing to you has never bothered me." I glanced toward the ring, waiting for you to make every move apparently should. Isabel's expression softened. I continued before humor could rescue me. I kept telling myself I was respecting the boundary. Most of the time, I was. Some of the time, I was also enjoying the fact that waiting meant I never had to risk getting the answer wrong. She looked at me for another moment. I was starting to wonder. "I know. You made me do a lot of the work. I know that too." Her mouth moved like she was fighting a smile. "This is disturbingly self-aware for you. Please don't interrupt. I may never achieve this level again." "That did it." She laughed, and the tension finally broke. Isabel stepped closer. "Tomorrow night," she said. 7. "That's a yes?" "That's a yes." "Good. I was prepared to negotiate until 7:30. You negotiate terribly from the bottom. I've heard that." We stood there with maybe a foot between us, and this time there was no coach-student uncertainty left to hide behind. I did not assume the next step. I reached for her hand instead. She looked down at it, then threaded her fingers through mine and pulled me closer herself. Our first kiss was brief, warm, and surprisingly calm after 6 weeks of trying to turn attraction into competition. When we separated, Isabel kept hold of my hand. "For the record," she said, I was going to say yes, even if you lost badly. That information would have been useful before the fight. Where's the fun in that? Dating Isabel did not make the gym suddenly simple. Nora continued handling my formal training and evaluations, which Isabel insisted was better for both our relationship and her blood pressure. Isabel still helped with exhibition drills and occasionally joined open sparring, but neither of us pretended that coaching and dating were interchangeable. Outside the gym, the competition followed us anyway. We argued over restaurants, bowling scores, whether my coffee qualified as a beverage, and which of us was worse at accepting directions. The difference was that neither of us needed the argument to hide what we actually wanted anymore. A few weeks later, I volunteered at another beginner clinic with 2 firefighters from my station. I worked registration, answered basic safety questions, and stayed out of Isabel's way while she coached. Near the end of the session, I watched a nervous woman land her first clean combination on a pad and immediately start laughing from surprise. Isabel laughed with her. That moment belonged entirely to them. I realized I no longer felt the need to find some reason to insert myself into everything important to Isabel. Being part of her life did not require becoming part of every achievement. Sometimes showing up meant knowing when not to take over. When the last beginner left, Isabel came across the mat carrying her gloves. "Dinner?" I asked. Eventually, she tossed one glove toward me. I caught it, one round first. I looked at the glove, then at her. "Are you ever going to stop asking me for rematches? Are you ever going to stop losing them?" "Absolutely not. It seems to be working out for me." She laughed and raised her gloves. I had spent months thinking our competition was the reason I kept coming back. By then, I understood it was only the language we happened to speak first. Isabel never needed me to beat her, and I never needed her to become easier to choose. We just needed to figure out when a challenge was fun and when it was time to stop circling and say what we actually wanted. If you were Jack, would you have recognized "still want a rematch" as flirting, or would you have waited until Isabel said it directly? Tell me in the comments. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.